Okay, Paul, I wanted to use Fraps to record this, but unfortunately Fraps, even though I'm using Windows 7, telling it to monitor desktop and everything, certain things like my Explorer channel here that's opened up, it won't record. And I've also found that in Blender and 3ds Max, it only wants to record the viewport. It won't show the menu drop downs or the buttons. So I've gone with like a slideshow with me doing a voiceover on it. So let me explain a few things here. Okay, here I've got a folder opened up. I don't know if you do this. This is one of the best ways to do this. Is you take the PRP files for a specific age, create a folder for it specifically for it, and dump the PRP files in that folder. The reason being is because it's your working folder. This is where you're going to save like a blend file, a max file. It's also going to end up being the folder where the temporary textures that the PRP, the plugin, extracts the textures from the age. It's going to want to put it into a folder called TMP underscore textures, and if you're doing it in the DAT folder of the game, it's going to dump it in there and create a huge mess. So I just wanted to point this out, that this is how I do this. Okay, so let's jump right into Blender and do it. Okay, here I've got Blender called up. It's Blender 2.49b, I think it is. And this is the one I'm using, the plugin that one of my friends Chol made. It actually works for it. That will actually extract all the textures also. And of course, you know, you open up with a brand new scene and everything. You go and you click on File. You go down to Import, and go over. And if you've got the plugin installed correctly, you'll have where it says PYPRP Import, and you would go and you would click on that. Now, once you click on it, you're going to get this little pop-up menu that's going to ask you want to import the full age, or a single PRP file, or import the textures only. Now, I wanted to point this out really quick. We're going to start with the, import the full age, but later, once you're done with that, you might want to go back and repeat these steps and click where it says the textures. Sometimes when it imports an age, for some reason, it doesn't want to extract every single texture that gets used in that age. I'm not sure why, but that third option in this little box will definitely make it to where you do. So, but in this case, so that would be the one of the things that you would need to get done at some point, and it puts all those textures in that temporary file. Now, next, of course, is going to be we click on full age and select our age file. So, of course, when we click on full age, it's going to pop up in the window here, and you have to navigate to where your folder is with the PRPs and the .age file. And that's what you click on, is the .age file. In this case, I picked a small, real quick age, the spy room. We click on the spyroom.age file, and then we click on the import button all the way on the upper right-hand corner. Blender then goes through and it does this little thing you see in the DOS window, if you want to call it up, as it calculates and imports the age file. Then it'll indicate that it's finished, and you'll be back in the Blender 3D window. Most times, what you'll see is the window will be blank. It'll simply say Scene up there in the Scene Select. So what you need to do is go up and call up the scene itself. In this case, it's only one main part of the age, which is the spy room. But larger ages, you may have other things to click on here. Now, I've put it on the spy room scene, and you may not see it right away. You may have to zoom out, which is important until you find it, and then navigate to where you can zoom in. The other thing I wanted to point out here is you may have to also go into the View Properties and change the end clip from the default 500 to where it says 10, where I've typed in 10,000 in this small box here that says View Properties. Else, what happens is you won't actually see the file, or rather the meshes and stuff in the age. So here we go. We've got the spy room. We have the outside of Takata Alley that you can actually see partly from the spy room, and of course the spy room itself. So now let's go to the next thing. Now you were talking about how do I find the textures and everything. If you want to see the actual textures applied to the objects that are in Blender, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go down and change it from solid to texture, which is that little button next to where you change what mode you're in, object mode, edit mode, and all that neat stuff. It'll default to solid mode. It just shows like an orangish yellow box. You need to change that to this really weird mushroom looking sphere, and that's to show textures. But when you do it, you're not actually going to see the textures right away. You're going to see a bunch of shaders, shader coloring from what lights are supposed to be there. The way you can actually make it to where you can see the textures in the 3D window if you want is you have to go up to the top menu to Game, and then you have to click on, I believe it's Blender GLS textures. And when you do that, you're going to have to sit and wait for a few minutes, depending on how big the age is. If the scene has a lot of stuff in it, it's going to take it a few minutes before it's ready for you again. In this particular case, it took about 20 seconds, and then it showed all the textures that you're seeing. Even though we can see them in here, this doesn't really help a whole lot. It's not going to tell me the name of the texture file that I use. There's a different way for that, which is next. Okay, the first thing you want to do, is to see what the textures are on an object in Blender is, of course, you select the object by right-clicking on it. In this case, one of the old wooden crates underneath this linking book is what I've got selected by right-clicking on it. Then you go down into your buttons window, and you want to click on the red sphere. That's the material editor in Blender. Once you've clicked on that sphere, it's going to show you the materials. And what's really cool about this is, you know how in Max we have multi-materials that have 1 to 16 materials or whatever. If you'll notice in the second box in that bottom window, it'll have the material channels, and it always starts off with the first material in that channel, and then if there's multiple materials, in this case there's only one, well, let's say this box had 9 different materials on it. It'll say 1 of 9, and you can click on those arrows and go to 2 to 9. And the reason that's important is it actually matches up with what you'll have in Max later on. So when you're trying to find out what you're supposed to apply to that material channel, you can come here and it'll match up. So we've gotten into the material, and now we need to actually see what the texture is. To see the actual textures that are applied in that particular material channel, all you do is click on the button next to the red sphere in the material editor. It looks sort of like an orange and with black dots on it, like a leopard skin or something. And this is what you'll see in the button window. It'll actually show you a small preview of the texture. But the important thing is to look all the way over to the right last square in the buttons window, and you'll see it has the file name and location of that texture. In this particular case, it's that temporary file where we had the ages. And it'll give you the full name and extension of the texture file. And so now you know, oh, okay, that material, I'm supposed to use this bitmap in the diffuse color section. So that's how I know what to apply in Max. Okay. Now, and of course, it's already applied here, so I don't have to mess with it. But that's how you navigate to find it here. Now, before I do, before I export anything from Blender, of course, one of the first things I do is I go in, and you have different layers that you can move to. It's one thing I like about Blender over Max. To me personally, it's easier to navigate the different layers of a scene with the use of the buttons and the M key. What I do is I take out the collision wireframes, the sensor regions, the empties, the lamps, the cameras. These are all things that we're not really going to use in Unreal, so they're worthless other than maybe figuring out the positions of where they have lights and where they have cameras and things like that. But we don't want to export them with FBX, so I go through and select all those and move them to other layers to get them out of the way. Don't want them there. Then once I'm done with that, I select everything in the scene, all the visible meshes, by hitting the A key a couple of times. Make sure everything's highlighted in pink. Then, and if you've installed that scripting that I put in the tools folder, if you click on object, go to the top to scripts, and then you'll see it says remove double vertices. You click on that. It may take a couple of minutes for a very large age, but it's important. It removes all the double vertices that got applied during the import process. Again, I don't know why it does that, but this is a really good tool to get this done quickly. Else you're going to have to select each and every visible mesh and manually remove every vertices. And I used to do that in the past, and it's extremely time consuming. So this is a very important step to get done before you do any exporting. Now, of course, to export, we go up to File, and we go to Export, and of course I use the FBX method. I don't really like trying to use any other method. It's never worked out too really well for me, so I still use FBX. And of course I go and I select the FBX option here, but only after I've selected everything that I want to actually export. Okay. Once I click on, Autodesk FBX, you'll know that this window pops up. Now, I do not change anything in here. I leave it exactly like it says. I only want to export the selected objects, not the entire scene. I don't have it do any conversions, anything. I've always gone with what the default settings are in here, and it's always worked just fine for me. So I just go ahead and I click on Export, and then of course it asks you for a file name. You put in the file name. And I have it export to my working folder where I put the PRPs and where the folder for the temporary textures and stuff are. And so that's what I do here. I haven't adjusted the scale of the age at this point. I try to manipulate very little here in Blender and leave the majority of the manipulations or anything I have to change in Max, because I'm trying to not get anything lost during conversion or during export. So I do a very minimal amount work here in Blender other than using it as a reference. So once I've exported it, I have something else that I have to do. Okay, the next thing that I have to do is I have to convert the FBX exported file from Blender to an FBX version that 3ds Max 9.0 can understand. If you're using Max 2014, supposedly you don't have to do anything like that. I did some research and looked into it, and after Max 2013 they stopped having a separate plugin for everything and having to use a converter. Supposedly with Max 2014 everything's included, and it did seem to work for me while I was doing my trial run of Max 2014. But in my case, I had to download a converter and set it for the right thing. And I go to the Convert FBX to FBX tab, and then I add the file. And here's why it's important for me. You may have seen that V5 folder. The V5 folder that's in my working folder here, in this particular case, this is the Great Zero that I'm working on. You'll notice there's FBX file exports that are in the root folder, Great Zero folder I'm working on. But then I have this V5 folder. That V5 folder is the converted FBX files that I can open up with Max. The FBX files that are sitting here, I've used this green arrows. It says the Blender FBX export file. It won't import correctly into 3ds Max 9.0. So I use the converter, and it creates a folder called V5. And inside that folder is the actual FBX file that's been converted that I can actually import into Max and then begin to work there. I'm going to create a second video using slides for Max 9 to show you what I do in Max 9, since this one's gotten up to over 13 minutes long.